So let's talk about the upcoming assignment that on some of the schedules, depending on when you looked at it, was called the news conference, but I've adapted this, so it's really going to be writing about an event because this is an online class, and so it can be difficult to get us all together in one place. So this will be writing about an event. And the event that you're going to watch, this is something that's posted online, you're going to watch a group of high school journalists speaking at the Newseum in Washington, D.C. This was prior to the March for Our Lives event in the spring. And these are high school students from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where there was a mass shooting earlier this year. The mass shooting, they were students there, and they're going to talk about what it was like to be there, but also these are the student journalists. So they turned from being a part of this as students to being student journalists to cover the shooting. So this is obviously a national issue. The issue of this happening in the Capitol, this big march, then there's the shooting in Florida, but the issue of school safety and guns, this is a national issue. But as is often the case, there are local connections. So at Texas State, Texas State actually has a nationally recognized program, the Alert Center, which trains first responders in active shooter situations. So it gets a fair amount of attention, and people contact the experts at the Alert Center when there's a tragedy like the one at Marjorie Stoneman. And then there's also the Texas State School Safety Center, or the Texas School Safety Center, which is based at Texas State, which is aimed at developing resources for schools during difficult times in general, so natural disasters, things like mass shootings. So it's kind of it's for more the school and the community during difficult times. So anyway, there's a lot going on with this case, and so first thing we have to think about, as with anything that we do in the media and mass media, from stratcom to journalism, is that we think about our audience. And so this is where this will be a little different for our online class, because you are all over the place, right? So some of you are right there in San Marcos taking an online class, and some are out of the state, out of the country. So this assignment, and then the one that follows it, diverse sources, are specifically designed to allow you to write the story and do interviews wherever you are. So I'll talk a little bit more about diverse sources in a minute, but essentially as you watch this event, and as you consider what your story might be, I want you to also consider where you will be in the coming week when we start the diverse sources story, because this will be sort of the background that you'll use for that story as well. So for example, if you're in Washington, D.C. area, then you might consider like what's happening at the national level with respect to gun safety and schools. If you're in Texas, there's quite a bit going on with arming K through 12 teachers, that sort of topic. So you might be considering that aspect. So let's get to the assignment requirements in general, and all of this is written in tracks for you, but I thought it might be a little easier also to listen to it. So this is a 1 hour long panel discussion with these high school students. It was at the Newseum. It was broadcast by C-SPAN. So I want you to watch or at least listen to the entire hour. And the assignment is you're going to write a story. You need quotes from at least 3 speakers, right? So quotes from at least 3 speakers, and you may easily have quotes from all the speakers. I think there were 4 or 5 students. There's a moderator, and you may have multiple quotes. You're going to write a story that's 300 to 500 words, and you're going to include appropriate context and background, right? So it's reporting what they're talking about at this event, but you are going to have to fill in the spaces for pieces that they may have left out if you need more for context. You're going to write a headline and put a byline on it and do the standard writing format with the space between paragraphs. Put it on a Word document, post it to tracks. This one we're not going to post on the class website, although I will say that if you want to, because you would like to use it as a clip, it is probably fine for you to do that. I mean, it's, this is a public event and you're writing about it, so that should not be a problem. So let's think about strategy for preparing for this event. And, we need to always prepare for events when we're going to cover them. I realize that this one is on your computer, and so it's not like you're facing a crazy deadline of I've got to learn all this stuff before I walk into a room or something's happening, but it's still good to think about this. So I want you to develop a strategy for how you prepare for the event, even though this is recorded. That means you've got to do some research on the background of this issue in the U.S., particularly the Florida shooting, because that will help you understand what the panel is talking about. You've got to think about quotes from the speakers. So you're going to hear the speaker say something, and it's one thing to just sort of passively listen, but I suggest you take notes, because when you take notes, it helps your memory. It sort of writes it to your brain. It helps you think about the organization, and it's an hour long. So if you just listen and then try to go back and figure out, what were the good quotes, that's going to be a lot of work. So instead, if you sort of jot down the quotes, at least part of them, as you go, the ones that really have an impact on you, that can help you remember them, and it can help you find them again. Because you are fortunate in this event, because there is a transcript included with the video. So whereas you would normally have to record and take copious notes and then go back through your recording, there's that one step has been cut out for you. So there's a transcript, but if you jot down information about a quote, you can more easily find it in the transcript. And I will say that just reading the transcript is not going to nearly bring the clarity to your story as if you watch this and hear the emotion as the students talk. So that was the strategy for preparation. Now the strategy for execution, for actually writing your story. The goal is a compelling story, obviously, but you can't write about everything. So you really have to narrow the focus. This is going to go on for an hour, which means, many, many topics will be discussed, much more content than you'd ever be able to use in a story. It's not about doing a transcript. I mean, if somebody wants the whole thing, they can watch the video. So your goal is to sort of do this, this compelling piece about these students at this event and some of the things they're saying. So what is the most interesting thing you heard or you learned when you were listening to this? What's the most compelling? What's the kind of thing that when you're done watching this, you want to turn to somebody and say, hey, this student just said this. And then think about selecting the best quote. So oftentimes when it's the, hey, I just heard this person just said this, that might be the best quote. And so the best quote and then the next couple of good quotes, if you can identify those, that can actually help create a path through the story. So one of the ways that I write sometimes for events is that you go and you listen to something for an hour, and the best quote might be how I focus my story. So if somebody says something that's really compelling and it's sort of a central message to what they've been talking about, I might use that as the second paragraph. And that means I write my lead in a way that sort of gives the reader enough context and brings the reader right up to that quote. And then that quote is like, bam, here's this really good statement. That strategy doesn't work all the time, and it may not be something that you want to do, but it is one way to do that. What information do you need to fill in the gaps? So I am sure, I'd have to go back and listen to this again, but I am sure there are times when one of the panelists says something but doesn't give you full details, right? Like you may need to know what time did this happen, what was the specific date, what's the actual name of that office, what, right? So you have to fill in those bits and pieces to double check, and then you may even need some more specific background, such as, as I was saying in the previous one, look ahead to diverse sources, but, you might include a paragraph about when they're talking about teachers and guns, you might include a paragraph on the Texas law, right, if you're going to be writing in Texas. Let's talk about ethics for a minute. Ethics and academic honesty, that says honest, it should say honesty. There is a transcript, as I said. Read through it. That'll help you recall the details. That'll be good. It'll spare you a little bit of note-taking and transcription. Definitely use it for the accuracy of the quotes to get the exact words. Also, this was a public event, a fairly sizable one, so there was media coverage. I urge you to look at that media coverage after you write your story, because looking at it ahead of time to sort of give you a clue as to how you might focus this story, what you might use, really can lead to unintentional plagiarism. It can be hard to get it out of your head that person wrote that lead, that's got to be the best lead. So I want you to avoid that at all costs, because plagiarism, intentional or not, results in at least a failing grade and can be a failing grade in this class. And it is a horrible, horrible dark mark on your record and reputation. So plagiarism is all sorts of things, copying basically. So copying words directly from another story, unless it's a quote. Of course, a quote, somebody could use the same quote as you do. Those are the exact words. But, copying other sentences or using very similar sentences. You may have learned that trick when you were in whatever grade in school where you just change out a few words. Doesn't work that way. That's still something that's too obvious. Using the same order of the story. This is where you can get into that sort of unintentional thing, thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to basically do what this person did. I'm going to write my own lead and then follow all the sort of paragraphs down that they did. Same quote, same order, that sort of thing. I want you to do this on your own. That's going to be the best learning. I'm fine with you going back afterwards and looking at how some of the other media outlets covered this. And also think about this. There's probably some bad stuff out there, right? Like, not everybody does a great job, so maybe you'll do better. As I said, this topic is going to carry forward, so the next story after this will be called Diverse Sources, and that's where you go out and do actual interviews in the community, wherever you are in the world. And you're going to be talking, the topic for Diverse Sources is gun safety and arming teachers. So it's a fairly broad topic in many respects, so if you find yourself in another country where the gun laws are very different, talking about this concept of school safety may look a little different for you. If you're in Texas, right there, like I said, there's some specific Texas laws and resources. So I want you to think about, you're doing this. This is going to give you a lot of very good background on this issue. And then we will, after this story, which is all sort of self-contained and covering this event, after this story, we'll move ahead to looking about how we ask a community their opinions on a topic, and we're sure that we get sort of many different voices represented in that story. But that will be after we've tackled this topic first. So good luck, and check out tracks for the full details on what this assignment entails.